Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about 4.7 engines versus the 5.7 Hemi and why I tend to favor the 5.7 over the 4.7. We've had some conversations about it with a few people and comments and things like that. So here's kind of a video clearing that up a little bit, my stance on it, where I'm coming from, and basically my experiences. So with that being said, if you don't know already, me and my brother actually used to buy up a bunch of third-gen Rams, you know, the 02 to 08 body style. And, you know, we'd sell parts, put some together, flip them, basically just third-gen Rams. So we've had a ton of them, and I'll just insert photos here and there throughout the video. But to kind of summarize, me and him both had Dodge trucks growing up. So we both kind of needed some truck parts, and the best idea just kind of seemed like, oh, let's just go buy a parts truck. But then we got kind of carried away, and we ended up having quite a few of them at the house at a time. Some of them we bought two at a time out of people's backyards. And you know, it's kind of a funny thing. In my experience, I've had a lot of good luck buying Hemi trucks that people said the motor was bad in that turned out not to be the case at all. For example, one time I went down to South Florida and bought a blacked out Dodge Ram Hemi, and they said the motor was locked up in it. As it turns out, the motor was not locked up. They literally just had bad battery terminals on it. It was really crusty, corroded. So I changed out the battery ends, connected them to the new battery, truck fired right up. Engine wasn't locked up at all. It was pretty much brand new, actually. It had been rebuilt like a year before with paperwork. So a lot of the Hemi trucks that I've seen were they, you know, do the ads listing it needs motor work, things like that, kind of blowing it out to be bigger than what it is. So we were picking up trucks for like $1,000, $1,500 usually, you know, Hemi ones, quad cabs. But really the biggest issue we ever saw was, you know, dropping valves. And, you know, you replace a piston and, you know, do the heads on it, get the heads machined, clean them up, and you have a good engine again. And you know, you're talking $200-300 max usually. So figure some of these trucks we bought, for example, $1,100, and you would end up with, you know, the whole drivetrain, the wiring, all that. You spend about $200-300, get the motor back in good shape, doing the head job on it, and for $1,500 you have a nice Hemi drivetrain to put in something. So with that being said, I mean, we were striking gold every time we went after one of these Hemi trucks cheap. There was a silver 03 Ram, I want to say it was a Daytona, could have been a Hemi Sport, I'm not really sure what it was. At some point it was a show truck, and it was loaded with kicker speakers, and it had a blow through from the bed to the cab full of subs in it. But it had the whole like Bumblebee Daytona kit for it, you know, the SRT scooped hood, the steps, side skirts all the way around, the tonneau cover, all of it, cat skin leather seats. And that was one of those trucks we got for $1,100. And the guy, we got there at 10 a.m. the guy is already on his second or third beer, and he's like, oh, well, there's more parts out back. So we dug through some stuff. We pulled out that SRT 10 hood, all kinds of crazy stuff, and we got all of it for $1,100, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. I mean, well, what's one of those SRT hoods worth today? $1,100 in itself, being, you know, the actual steel factory hoods. But, you know, with all that being said, we've had a lot of 4.7 trucks too, and where to begin with those? It's not that they're bad engines. They're just very finicky. Uh, you know, if a lifter seizes in them, it'll throw the rocker off, and then you have to deal with all that mess. But then you have kind of the bigger timing chain that, wraps around each head, goes down into the motor, and the timing chain is all like kind of encased in the motor itself. It's kind of a pain, but it is what it is. Versus the Hemi timing chain, it's little. It's, just 2 gears pretty much, and that's it. I've seen a lot of people, trying to rebuild the 4.7s on their own at home, and they have timing issues. It's hard for them to set them, apparently. But two, the 4.7s, if you overheat those, they don't stand up very well to, let's say, abuse. If they run hot, your motor's done. It's not like a Hemi where you can just do head gaskets, plane the heads, and you're good. So that's kind of what I tend to favor the Hemis more. But also, think about it this way. The Hemi, you get a lot more power, and you get better fuel economy. Those 4.7s usually don't get that great of gas mileage. I know in one of my 4.7 trucks, it was an earlier 2002, 2003. No matter what you did, you got 10 miles per gallon. It didn't matter if you were just driving normal, towing, on the gas. 10 miles per gallon, that's what you're getting. Actually, to rewind back for a minute, there's another kind of thing with the whole 4757 finding them used in used trucks. A lot of times, let's talk about misfires for a minute. A misfire in a 4.7 could be anything from something crazy to, your lifter seized or something serious is going on. Usually with the Hemis and the 5.9 360s, if you have a low battery, it can cause a misfire or a vacuum issue. You aren't really getting the whole crazy, timing issues that the 4.7 would have. Plus the overhead cams in the 4.7, that adds another element to it. The Hemi and the 5.9 are just kind of more simple engines, a little bit easier to work on. And it saves a lot of time too. But with the 4.7 engines, what we noticed and came across a lot is, so the 4.7 engine is mostly aluminum, right? Well, there is a plastic intake on top of the 4.7 engine, and it bolts to the block with these studs that mount the intake to the block. And on top of the stud, I'll see if I can post some pictures in here as to what I'm talking about. So your coil pack slides on top of the stud that mounts the intake to the block. And then there's a nut that goes on the coil pack to hold the coil pack in place. For whatever reason, I guess people doing spark plugs, they torque the crap out of those bolts, and they'll actually strip out a hole in the aluminum block. So what happens if your bolt in the intake to the block is stripped out? You have a leak. So your air intake manifold is leaking. Air's getting in there. Runs like crap. So just think about that. A lot of times you will have stripped out bolts in those aluminum blocks. And also, it does happen on 4.7s and the Hemis, is the exhaust manifold bolts. Sometimes those will get stripped out, and that's kind of a pain in the butt in itself too. But that freaking 4.7, nightmare of the coil packs, all the stuff that strips out. Because, think about it. A lot of people that do their own spark plugs, that's one thing, it's kind of one of the basic things. A lot of people that aren't very mechanically inclined, that don't know, not to crank that thing down, will mess it up. And then, oh, my truck doesn't run right, let me get rid of it. So that's what you're finding out there. And, that shows misfires and all that too. But that one's a nightmare. That's why I stopped looking for 4.7 trucks, unless basically I'm going to put a different motor in it. That's when I go for a 4.7 truck. And again, I'm not knocking 4.7s. Like, some of them do last, 300,000 miles plus. It's just me personally, I would not go seek out a used one, knowing what I know about them, because a lot of people just don't take care of them. They're used, abused, and thrown away. And I know that's the same way with a lot of the Hemis. Everyone has their own experience. There's, exceptions to rules and things like that. But just in general, from my experience finding used Dodge trucks, I've always had better luck with the Hemis. That the motors usually end up working for me. There's trucks I have put a new 4.7 engine in, and it turned out to be the wiring was burnt up in it. Like, how does that even happen? And actually, while I'm here on this topic too, if you have a motor issue and chunks are, floating around in your motor, and you replace your motor, you need to replace that air intake too. If you don't replace it, have somebody clean it out very good to get all the metal chunks out of that intake, because you will mess up your new motor too. So generally, that's why I end up favoring the Hemis. I always, refer, get the Hemi model. But two, so if you don't know this by now, first gen, like a 01, 02 Durango is one of my favorite cars. I'm actually planning to build another one with a Hemi swap in it, but the older 03 Hemi. Again, that's another thing in itself. In 2003, the Hemi was offered without the EGR in it, which to my knowledge, that's the only year that came like that. A lot of the 04 Rams, Durangos, the other vehicles that had Hemis in them all had EGR, except for that 2003 for some reason. So I tend to seek out 2003s because they don't have all the crazy EGR stuff in them. You don't have to worry about it, which, I mean, that's kind of a benefit, really. So I'm probably going to put a Hemi motor from like a 2003 Ram into one of the, like a 02, 03 Durango. Which, again, if you don't know about that, if you pick up a 4.7 Durango, you can pretty much bolt in the early 5.7 Hemi and transmission, because the 4-speed and the 5-speed have the same housing for the transmission. So it bolts right in. You can use the drive shaft out of the Durango in it. The only thing you really have to sort out is the wiring in it, which really that's not that big of a thing either. But I'll probably do a whole build series on that. So with that being said, we've had a couple Rams, we bought and sold some. One we traded for like a 76 Trans Am. And, some we built just to be crazy little projects. I took a bunch of parts and built one for myself, my big blue one, which originally started life as a Patriot Blue. And, over time, it ended up becoming this huge, I don't even know how to explain it. I ended up putting 2500 suspension underneath it, lifted it. It was a pretty decent truck, supercharged. It was pretty known in town for what it was. People used to come to me for Ram parts, Ram issues, hoping I could help them sort it out. So that's kind of how my past came into play with all that. So, and also, if you don't know, I used to have this monster Durango, lifted that. It had full Ram suspension underneath it. But that one just didn't work out for me. We ended up moving on from that. You know, the timing wasn't right for me on that. But my new idea is similar to that. You know, a Hemi swap ram suspension underneath it, but maybe more of like a sport lower one with some wide body fenders on it. Something a little different, unique. It's gonna be probably quite a bit of metal fab on it to make it look the way I want it to look. But I pretty much have all the parts. It's just a matter of physically doing it, like most of my projects. And, you know, the reason I've kind of been talking about a few of the projects, you know, and haven't really been able to do anything is because, you know, we're in the middle of the move. We're setting up a new shop. We're looking for another house, maybe more workspace, and keep the new shop at the house more of like a storage area for completed things and our nicer cars. But that's kind of where we're at there. It's just, you know, a long process for this year, you know, getting everything done, trying to get situated. But I'll be trying to do a few little projects here and there. We're actually here to pick up the Subaru again. I was cleaning up my brother-in-law's Subaru Legacy while he was off at boot camp. But after not driving for 3 months, he came home, got the car, and immediately smacked it on the shed and pretty much ripped the front end of it off again, even worse than last time. So we're gonna be fixing that again. That'll probably be a little video. We got new headlights, front bumper again. We got the brackets for under the headlights and that sort of thing. As you can see, the old Subaru has definitely seen better days. He definitely did a number on the car with the shed. That's pretty serious right there. So this will be fun to get into that and see what exactly he did to it. Yeah, interesting. Never seen that happen before. Look how many places that bumper's ripped in. So that's all for today's video. Be sure to like and subscribe, follow along if you want to see what's coming next. We still got a lot of things in motion.